Macbeth, Act 2, Scene 1. Now, in this scene, we really will only get Macbeth. So at the beginning, we will have Banquo and his son Fleance. Macbeth will chat with them for a little while. But the remainder of the scene is a very, very famous soliloquy. It's the dagger soliloquy, if you've ever heard anyone mention it, because I know you and your friends talk about Shakespeare just all the time. Um, but in this scene, it's important to consider, in the same way that we thought about, all right, where were the witches during Act 1, Scene 2? The same idea. Macbeth will start his soliloquy by saying, "Is this a dagger I see before me?" Meaning that Macbeth is seeing a dagger, but we as audience members, depending on how a director decides to do this scene, a movie or stage, there might be a dagger that the audience can see as well, or it might just be a dagger that Macbeth can see. So you want to think about, why is he seeing this dagger? Are the witches sending it to him? Is he hallucinating? Is it actually physically there in front of him? And as an audience member, do we want to see the dagger, or is it better if we don't see the dagger? So for Act 1, Scene 2, or Act 2, Scene 1, pay attention to how Macbeth behaves after talking to Banquo. You have a poll question of who will kill Duncan. Do you think it'll be Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo, or do you think that it will be no one, which would be a bad answer because all I've done is spoil the fact that Duncan is going to die. You can't really have a plot to Macbeth without the death of Duncan, but think about who will actually follow through on this murder. Who do you think will actually wield the sword or the dagger or whatever it will be? So we will open in Macbeth's castle. Banquo and Fleance are there. It's very late in the evening. It's basically getting ready for bedtime. And there's a note here for you. But remember, during the opening with the witches, they say, thou shalt not be king, but thou shalt get kings. Meaning you won't be king, Banquo, but your son and your son's son will become king all the way down the line. Now remember that King James thought he was a descendant of Duncan and Banquo, so by saying that Banquo's children and their children and so on and so on and so on will become King of Scotland, that would mean that James was the rightful King of Scotland, because he was related to Banquo and this prophecy. Here we go, Act 2, Scene 1.
How goes the night, boy?
The moon is down. I have not heard the clock.
And she goes down at 12.
I take 'tis later, sir.
Hold, take my sword. There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out. Take thee that, too. A heavy summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Merciful powers, restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. Give me my sword. Who's there?
A friend.
What, sir, not yet at rest? The king's abed. He hath been an unusual pleasure, and sent forth great largesse to your offices. This diamond he greets your wife withal, by the name of most kind hostess, and shut up in measureless content.
Being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should free have wrought.
All's well. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth.
I think not of them. Yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time.
At your kind's leisure.
If you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor for you.
So I lose none in seeking to augment it, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear, I shall be counselled.
Good repose the while.
Thanks, sir. The like to you.
And at that moment, Banquo and Fleance exit. Now, we don't know exactly how old Fleance is supposed to be. Usually when I read the play, I always think of him as being around 11, 10, maybe 12 at the most. He's young enough that he is still a child, but not so young that his father isn't, Banquo just hands him a sword in the middle of the night and is like, here, hold my sword for a little bit. I assume you wouldn't hand a 6-year-old your sword. But Macbeth comes in and they have this discussion. And Banquo says, I've been having these dreams about the weird sisters. I feel really odd about the prophecies. And Macbeth lies to him and says, oh, the witches, I haven't thought about them since we met with them. Which, sir, you've had multiple scenes in Act 1 where you've talked about the witches and their prophecies. But I want you to consider, why does he lie to Banquo? What is his reason for lying? And if you are thinking about the character development of Macbeth, who will go from, this great warrior to a very evil, evil man by the end of the play, where when he dies, we're not upset about it. We actually are rooting for him to die in this play. Think about why he might be lying to Banquo. So he's going to tell his servant to exit, and then we are going to get into the very, very famous speech, the dagger soliloquy.
Go bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Get thee to bed. Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat of pressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now o'er the one half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf whose howls his watch. Thus, with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design, moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm-set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabouts, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whiles I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives.
Remember,
I
Lady
go,
Macbeth was ringing the bell.
and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
So the bell rings. Lady Macbeth was supposed to ring the bell to let Macbeth know when it's time to go through with the plan. But even in this whole scene where he's talking about this dagger and he's looking at it and he says, it's pointing in the direction that I'm supposed to be going. So the dagger in his mind is pointing towards where Duncan is sleeping. And he says, and it's the instrument I was supposed to use. It's the same murder weapon. And he pulls out his own dagger to say, it looks just like this dagger, but I can still see this imaginary dagger and it's got blood on it. So if you think about the symbolism behind that, think about blood as violence and passion. And Macbeth in this moment is, even as he is about to go, maybe, murder Duncan, we don't know yet, Duncan is still alive at this moment, he is still conflicted about it. And this soliloquy with the dagger helps us see that he's still conflicted. Because as the bell rings at the end, yes, he strengthens in his decision. He is going to go and do it or participate in it. But he says, this bell invites me, hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. So he says, I hope you don't hear this bell. I hope you don't wake up, because this is the bell that summons me to go and kill you. And when you die, you will either go to heaven or to hell. So even in this moment, when Macbeth is thinking about the afterlife, he still doesn't have a solid idea of what happens. He's still conflicted about all of this. So, based on those lines, what is about to happen?